don't want them in our country, I'll be honest with you, okay? Somebody would say, oh, that's not politically correct. I don't care.
Vote for me so we can kick every dirty Muslim out of Texas.
I don't fear the groomers. I don't fear the pedophiles. I don't fear the corrupt politicians. And I definitely do not fear the dirty Muslims.
Valentina is just a bigot, plain and simple. And you can tell by looking at her that her IQ hovers around room temperature.
Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth have killed more people than Jeffrey Dahmer with his illegal strikes.
Dude, I've killed more people than Jeffrey Dahmer, and I don't think I'm a bad guy.
The scale of the Minnesota fraud scandal is jaw-dropping by anyone's measure. More than $1 billion has been illicitly drained from welfare programs, mostly by members of the large Somali community. At least some of that money is thought to have ended up in the coffers of Islamist terror group al-shabaab. And some of the early attempts to investigate this mass fraud were reportedly silenced over fears of racism. We've seen this story before. There's uncomfortable echoes of a UK grooming scandal in which the systematic abuse of young white girls by mostly Pakistani men was shamefully ignored over fears of stoking racial tensions. But just as it's absurd and abhorrent to argue that every British Muslim man is a rapist, it's clearly wrong to say that every one of the 16,000 Somalians in the US are thieves. That's why many are unhappy with some of the rhetoric pouring from the White House.
I hear they ripped off Somalians. Ripped off that state for billions of dollars, billions, every year, billions of dollars, and they contribute nothing. The welfare is like 88%. They contribute nothing. I don't want them in our country, I'll be honest with you, okay? Somebody would say, oh, that's not politically correct. I don't care. I don't want them in our country. Their country's no good for a reason. Their country stinks. And we don't want them in our country. I could say that about other countries, too.
Well, anyone who thinks the president himself is an Islamophobe might want to check with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia or the Emir of Qatar. But there's no doubt that his words carry weight with the people who support him. And just as we saw in the aftermath of a National Guard terror attack carried out by an Afghan immigrant who'd worked with the CIA, many think it's now open season on all Muslims. Republican congressional candidate Valentina Gomez, who's listening in and joins us shortly, posted this.
Texas, I've officially filed to become your next congresswoman. So the choice is yours. Vote for me so we can kick every dirty Muslim out of Texas. For me, this is just an election. But for you and your daughter, this is your life. Because Texas has only gotten more Muslim under these weak Republicans. New York City already fell to Islam. So did Michigan and Minnesota. And you're next in line. If Texas falls to Islam, it's simply because you didn't vote correctly. God bless you all.
Well, many people who railed against woke identity politics, including myself, said they were doing so because they believe in a free market meritocracy. Judge people by what they do and not what they are. Stop dividing everybody into fighting factions based on skin colour or religion and claiming your team is under existential attack. Security and immigration is a separate debate, and we're going to have it in a moment. But I have a simple message for everybody now blaming every Muslim for every one of their problems. Stop being so woke. And we'll debate all this with my panel in a moment. But joining me now is Tricia McLaughlin, the Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs at the Department of Homeland Security. Welcome. First of all, there are lots of legitimate issues with immigration in the United States, as indeed there are in my country. And I've said this a few times on my show recently, that I think most Americans agree with the extraordinary success of the Trump administration in basically shutting down the southern border after how porous it was under the Biden administration. Most Americans I've spoken to agree that if an undocumented person in the United States commits a crime separate to their status, they should be deported. The flashpoint comes when you get to the next stage, which is people who are being rounded up and perhaps deported simply for being undocumented, and that's a more contentious issue. But we now have a new flashpoint in this debate following the appalling attack on the National Guard by an Afghan who'd been brought here obviously from the war, where that person had helped with America and the allied forces there. But you also have this issue with the Somalians. I guess my question for you is, can we make forceful points about these things without descending into what many people think is deeply inflammatory rhetoric? Whether it's what I just quoted there from Valentina Gomez about dirty Muslims, or whether it's the president himself, calling Somalia garbage and all the rest of it. Do we have to be more careful about the language we use as we make the points we want to make?
Well, Piers, I'm less concerned about policing people's words, and I'm way more concerned about public safety. And what we're seeing here, I think we have to get back to base camp and say, how did we get here? Well, first of all, with the individual who's the terrorist who committed that heinous attack and killed one of our heroes, one of our National Guardsmen, he entered under Operation Allies Welcome. Unfortunately, under the Biden administration, he was paroled in the country with very little vetting, virtually no biometric vetting, no criminal background check, no cyber, no financial crime background check. Really what happened was that they took people that this individual knew, took as statements of facts their backing of this individual, and he went on to commit that heinous attack as well. They were not doing asylum interview checks when he came into the country. So what the Trump administration has really had to do is get back to how are we vetting the people who are coming into this country, whether it be under parole, whether it be under visa. So we have re-implemented social media vetting, biometric, making sure we're definitely doing those background checks, whether it be financial crimes, cyber, XYZ. We have to know who's in this country because that's what it's all about, is public safety. Your country, Piers, we know that you want to know who is in your country and make sure that they have your country's best interests at heart. And that is the same with the United States of America.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with that. It's estimated there are 260,000 people of Somalian descent in the United States, according to the latest census numbers. The largest population is in Minneapolis-St. Paul, home to about 84,000 Somalians, of which 58% were born in the United States. And I guess the point that people are making is it fair to tar every Somalian with the same brush of being a criminal when many of them may be completely law-abiding citizens living perfectly law-abiding lives?
Well, we're following the facts, the data, and the analysis here, and we're looking at leading indicators. So take Somalia or take Afghanistan. If you have a failed regime and these individuals are coming from this country, the United States, to some degree, is reliant on information from the country of origin to get the information for that background check, for that vetting. So if you have a terrorist regime like the Taliban giving the United States information or withholding information about this public safety threat this individual may pose to the United States, that's not information we can rely upon. We might be allowing another terrorist to come into this country. And then there's another aspect of this that Homeland Security investigation does an incredible job on. And I do have to give kudos to the Trump administration because this has been a whole of government approach, is we're really looking holistically at the data. What are the leading indicators if someone's going to be a public safety threat, potentially a terrorist, potentially a public charge, so they're using our social safety net as a hammock? Those are all things that we look at, whether it be Somalia, whether it be Afghanistan, or what are the other 19 countries of concern.
So at the moment, it's looking like there's a focus on these 19 countries, but a possible expansion of a travel ban to more than 30 countries. What timescale are you looking at for these suspensions?
As far as the pause or as far as when we're going to release that list, Piers?
Well, both, actually.
As far as that pause, I think it's going to be, we're going to have to really follow the data here and review these on a case-by-case basis. We want to make sure we're fair here, but we're also not letting people into the country who might pose a public safety threat. That's a huge issue. I think it was a wake-up for a lot of Americans. This has been something that we've been focused on with USCIS since day one. Of course, illegal immigration has gotten a lot of focus in this country, as it should, as it is such an important issue. But of course, there is the legal immigration system in this country as well. It wasn't just these nearly 200,000 Afghan nationals who came into this country after September 2021, but there was a swath of parole programs, really millions of individuals who came into this country. We have to evaluate those individuals as well, those green card holders and others who received immigration benefits. And as far as when that list is going to be released, Secretary No made this recommendation to the president. My understanding is he's reviewing it, and so it'll be on his timetable.
What do you say to the millions of Muslims who are looking at these travel bans and thinking that the Trump administration doesn't want Muslims in America? I think there are 4 or 5 million Muslims in the United States at the moment. Again, the vast majority of whom have committed no crimes. What's your message to those people?
The number one responsibility and duty of an elected leader, namely the President of the United States, is to protect his people. We just faced a terrorist attack on our soil a week ago. The President has the right, this administration has the right to look at who's in our country and make sure that this will never happen again. But Piers, I also think it's important for your viewers to know it wasn't just this individual under Operation Welcome, Allies Welcome, that posed a terroristic threat. Just 24 hours before that terrorist plot occurred, there was another individual out of Fort Worth, Texas, who was threatening to blow up a building in Fort Worth. He also entered the country under Operation Allies Welcome. So, of course, we have to look at this.
I mean, I concur. I would point out, of course, you've had a lot of US citizens, service people, who've committed terrible crimes as well. It's not exclusive to people that have come in on these programs. And secondly, when you have people who have been directly helping the United States in war zones at great risk to their own lives, there is a duty of care there, isn't there? Because if they all get sent back to, say, Afghanistan, then the Taliban is very likely to execute them.
Piers, you brought up a fantastic point about domestic crime here in the United States. We do have U.S. citizens who are carrying out crime on a day-to-day basis. It is, again, the job and duty of a leader to make sure that problems at home are solved before you bring in more people who could potentially pose a national security threat. Why would we bring in more people who could potentially commit crimes against other human beings, against other Americans? And as far as those who did help out American citizens, as far as helping out our U.S. military on the ground in Afghanistan, that's absolutely something we consider. But we also have to consider the fact that when Operation Allies happened, there was not vetting. We don't truly know if some of these individuals were helping out our men and women in uniform on the ground. Some of them have their other interests and priorities, such as potentially lining their own pockets, where they even actually helping. But that is, of course, something we are working incredibly closely with the Department of War on.
Tricia McLaughlin, Assistant Secretary of State for Public Affairs. Thank you very much indeed. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Piers.
Well, joining me to debate all of this is Rob O'Neill, the former US Navy SEAL who served extensively in Afghanistan and killed, of course, Osama bin Laden, the Republican congressional candidate Valentina Gomez, the Palestinian-American journalist Omar Baddar, plus author, activist and attorney Qasim Rashid. Well, welcome to all of you. Rob O'Neill, great to have you back on Uncensored, as always. You've served in Afghanistan. This is a complex issue, isn't it? Because there are many Afghanis who helped America in the war against the Taliban, for example, who then got brought back to the United States. And this can include translators or people who actually fought alongside Americans or whatever it may be, but who performed a valuable public service for America, who were brought back to the United States. And the fear about them is that in the light of this dreadful attack on the National Guard members, which is a clear terrorist attack by one of these people who's just gone rogue or maybe got radicalized. We just don't know yet the full story. But whatever it was, it caused him to commit double murder. In the process of working through how this gets resolved, there's a potential for a lot of these Afghanis to be sent back to Afghanistan. Well, I would think they would face immediate threats to their lives and possible death.
Well, Piers, you said it correctly when I think the word you use is complex, because that's the simplest way to say it. It's very, very complex, and there's so many different avenues. When I think of guys that we worked with coming back here, I'm very familiar with that. When I was over there running an outstation in Jalalabad, Afghanistan, we were hiring locals, and I remember just, parts of Hearts and Minds is to, build the economy, hire electricians, hire plumbers, house security, hire cooks. And I was explaining to one of my guys over there, I called him Larry, he was from Kabul, the thought of a Walmart. And I explained a Walmart to him, and he said, wait, you can get ice and milk in the same store? And I'm like, yeah, dude, you can get ice, you can get milk, you can get your taxes done, your oil changed. I'm trying to explain to it, and it just blew his mind. The idea of a store where you can get everything is so beyond a lot of the people that are born in certain places' capacity that putting them in a place like the United States without properly assimilating is going to be a big problem just off the bat. This dude that allegedly committed the murder and the shootings, would lock himself in blacked out spaces, all depressed, which I see that not speaking the language, not being used to what you're doing here. It's not as simple as Iraq, Afghanistan. What's the difference? They helped us bring them over here. This is a major shift in them. And you need to keep in mind, men like that, a lot of them, they don't even know how old they are. All they know is violence their entire life. They've been fighting wars forever. They might resort to violence. A lot of stuff needs to be considered, not just thanks for helping us and try not to do the call to prayer 5 times a day. There's so much involved, and it takes a lot of thinking, a lot of planning, and not just shoot from the hip solutions. So I think that these are pretty much one of one every time.
Omar Baddar, welcome back to Uncensored. Good to have you back. You just heard me speak to Tricia McLaughlin, Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs at the Department of Homeland Security. There's a lot of stuff going on here with the administration now in relation to the Somalians, with this issue in Minnesota, with relation to Afghanis because of the shooting of the National Guard members and so on. What is your overview about what is going on?
Yeah, Piers, we know this stuff pretty well when it's committed by people domestically. The overwhelming majority of mass shootings that occur in the United States are committed by white people. The person who shot Charlie Kirk, it's white. People who shoot up schools on a regular basis. And we have the common sense to say we deal with these people individually. This is not reflective of the white community in America, and it doesn't mean that we have to take measures against the white community in the United States. We say what mental health factors, what ideological motivations. We deal with it with a level of nuance that makes sense. And we have an administration that simply traffics in bigotry. And so when you have an act of violence committed, in this case, the guy from Afghanistan, he was a recruit for CIA death squads in Afghanistan. That's the operative point. It's the death squads part that makes people more inclined towards violence and makes them a risk, not the fact that he's Afghan. And to then take this particular incident and to generalize it about what threat Afghans might be posing or what threats Somalis might be posing or Muslims or whatever, that is bigotry 101. Basic elementary common sense can tell you that this is not how you deal with situations. And it's just incredibly disappointing and disheartening that we're living in a context in which people use that kind of bigotry to try to gain political advantage. People move people's emotions in a way that helps them take a political advantage. And it's extremely disappointing and the wrong way to go about things, especially if you're trying to build a strong, united country. You don't do it by dividing people like that.
Valentina Gomez, you were laughing as you were listening there. Many people have not been laughing at your video, particularly at phrases like "vote for me so we can kick every dirty Muslim out of Texas." If you had a Muslim candidate in Texas saying "vote for me so we can kick every dirty Christian out of Texas," you would rightly, I imagine, be outraged at that. Why do you think it's acceptable to use a phrase like "so we can kick every dirty Muslim out of Texas"?
Good morning, Piers. And since you didn't have the decency of introducing me correctly, I'll happily do it. Good morning to all of my beautiful people in England. Hello to all of my lads in the UK. Last time I was there, I had an amazing time. I'm Valentina Gomez. I will be the next congresswoman for the state of Texas, and I'm a warrior of the one true King Jesus Christ. And England and Piers, the United States and England was built by white Christian men that follow Jesus Christ, not by a bunch of Mohammeds. So let's get that cleared out right away.
Right, you haven't answered my question. Why do you, if it was the other way around, you would be rightly outraged. Why do you think it's acceptable as somebody running for office in the United States to be so blatantly, why would you be so blatantly hateful towards one group of people?
You call it hateful and bigotry and racist and all of that garbage. I call it the truth. America is a Christian nation. These Muslims come to Christian nations, burn our churches, rape our women, shoot our American soldiers point blank, killing one of them in broad daylight, then chanting Allahu Akbar. Piers, my brother is a National Guardsman. He literally puts himself on the line for this nation. So yes, these dirty Muslims have no place in America and have no place in England.
But as you speak, you see, I'm just seeing a brazen Islamophobe. And people say that phrase doesn't exist. It doesn't. And I'm sure you find it funny, but I think you can make perfectly pertinent points about what's happened here without descending into such vile hatred towards an entire religion. And there are 5 million Muslims in the United States. Why would you want to categorize them in such a grotesque manner?
Oh, and those 5 million Muslims should definitely go back to their 56 Muslim nations. And let's get something very clear right now in your little show, Piers. I don't fear the groomers. I don't fear the pedophiles. I don't fear the corrupt politicians. And I definitely do not fear the dirty Muslims.
Let me bring in.
Can I jump in here real quick?
Yeah, you can. Yeah.
No.
I mean, we should be clear about the fact. I mean, sure, Valentina is just a bigot, plain and simple, engages in the worst kinds of bigotry imaginable. But it's worth noting that she's fundamentally un-American, because the American Constitution says that you cannot discriminate against people based on religion. That is pretty clear. And so she's engaging in an anti-American campaign in the name of protecting America, which is just irony beyond imagination. So yes, she's a charlatan. She doesn't know what she's talking about. You can tell by looking at her that her IQ hovers around room temperature. To me, the real scandal is not engaging with her directly, because she's beneath taking seriously. But the problem is with the GOP, that you have a major party in this country having a candidate running under its flagship, engaging in this kind of really incredibly hateful, incendiary rhetoric, and they do nothing about it. We've seen it with the dissent with Donald Trump himself, with the lawlessness that he has brought to the table and the corruption that he's allowed to get away with, without the party really standing up and putting country before party and before president. And you can see that slippery slope now leading to this level, where you have just a complete hateful clown like this person representing that party without the party objecting to it.
Yeah, you know what?
Leading us towards a very, very dark place in this country.
I actually completely.
All right.
I completely agree with you. There are perfectly legitimate.
No, Piers. And to
well,
the
I
other
do.
Muslim,
I actually do agree with him. I think your brazen
No.
bigotry is obvious.
Let's make something very clear, Piers.
Yeah.
I only discriminate against terrorists. These terrorists have no place in America. They have no place in the world. And the best type of terrorist is a dead terrorist. And let's look at your Quran. Your Quran 8:12 states to terrorize and behead those who believe in scriptures other than the Quran. And that Afghani, that dirty Muslim that killed Sarah Beckstrom.
It doesn't actually say that, and this is the problem.
And Andrew Wolf, who is
All right, let me bring in Qasim
Yeah,
Rashid. Welcome to Uncensored. If you'd like to say what you want to say.
Yeah, I co-sign everything Omar said there. And I think fundamentally this is where we are as a country, where rather than talking about real serious issues, we have these firebrands. I think she ran in Missouri, got 7%, moved to Texas to try to lose there as well. Look, the reality is that, we need to look at the facts here. And the facts tell us that immigration is a net positive in every single way to this country. The facts tell us, a Northwestern University study of the last 150 years found that at no point in American history have immigrants had a higher crime rate than born U.S. citizens. We're talking about Somalia, and we're talking about Minnesota. Well, Minnesota is the 4th best state in the country to start a business and to live and to work. It's the 15th safest state in the country as well. And so, the difference here is that we want the constitutional principles of due process of law to apply. And this, this idea that we're a Christian nation is contradicted by the founders of this country itself. We are actually a secular democratic republic where people can believe or not believe as they wish without oppression. And I think it's critically important that whatever our, political differences, we stand united on this basic principle that human dignity, human rights, religious freedom must be protected, even for those with whom I disagree, because at the end of the day, that's what the First Amendment requires, that's what the Constitution requires. If we lose that principle, then we deteriorate into fascism and anarchy, and I don't think anybody wants that.
Rob O'Neill, what do you feel about this? I do feel that rhetoric matters when we talk about these things. I do think that some of the language we've just heard from one of the other panelists is outrageous, appalling, disgusting, bigoted. It just should be called out for what it is, whether you're on the left or right. It makes a difference to me. But what do you feel about this? I just feel these debates should be had without descending into blanket bigotry.
Well, debates should be had, but I also believe in the First Amendment. You should be able to say whatever you want.
Oh, sure. Yeah, but that gives me the right to call it out.
Well, it's designed to protect speech you hate, and I would much rather someone be telling me exactly how they feel than like people in Washington do, tell me what I think I need to hear, and then go behind my back and commit massive fraud. I want to hear. You can say whatever you want. Someone who's been canceled, myself, say what you want, but deal with the consequences as they come, justified or not. That's just how it is. But the conversation is needed. Even on forgive me, but one of the guests called the Afghan part of a death squad is someone who spent a lot of time with this particular pursuit team, but they were actually called the counterterror pursuit team. I don't know. We don't have death squads, so that's ridiculous. That's violent rhetoric right there itself. But he should be able to say it just when people like me who have been places like that realize, well, this guy's obviously doesn't know what he's talking about. But anyway, but again, the conversations do need to be had, because broad brush stroking everyone, every religion, every color of skin is wrong. But then if your only defense is Islamophobe, racist, name calling, that's nothing either.
No, but I agree. Listen, I've seen it for example, with the war in Gaza, that anyone who criticizes, as I have done increasingly in the last year, the Israeli government for decisions it's taken, having always supported their right to defend themselves and always supported the state of Israel to exist. But notwithstanding that, if you criticize the Israeli government, immediately you get branded now an anti-Semite, which I think is absurd. So I think you've got to take what people say and you've got to analyze it, and you've got to accept that criticizing an institution or a government for decisions they take, particularly in war, doesn't make you hateful of the people. I mean, it was interesting. I thought you posted something which Donald Trump reposted, Rob, which I'd love you just to expand on. Sure. You said in relation to the murder of the 2 National Guard members, if you've never been to Afghanistan, you wouldn't understand it. If you showed these people an espresso machine and gave them free coffee, they would assume you were a witch and chop your head off, but let's bring them in. Now, that's created, as you know, a lot of furore. What exactly did you mean?
Well, I mean, that's obviously tongue in cheek, and I actually I used X for purely entertainment, and that's that. What the point I was making, I have been to places like the Pesh River Valley in Afghanistan, where there's families from the Shuriak Valley, the Korangal Valley, who have probably been living next to each other for 10,000 years. But if you make a mistake as someone from the Shuriak going to the Korangal, they're going to cut your head off. This is a very serious place, and the vast majority of Westerners have no idea what they're talking about. Northeastern Afghanistan, northwestern Pakistan, the federally administered tribal area. These are not places like here. If you just grab people like that and say, hey, you're an American, you're going to get what happened here because of the violence and not understanding. The point I was making, I showed a dude, we were going to rescue Marcus Luttrell. I showed a dude from the Shuriak Valley, his own village, the first time he'd ever seen an iPad or an aerial shot. I might as well have showed him the face of Muhammad itself. The guy, he physically couldn't handle the technology I was showing him. A lot of these people can't physically handle the Western culture until they're properly assimilated. That was my point, peppered with humor.
It's a very familiar story when it comes to debt. The banks win, you pay. Fees and phone calls pile up every month unless you fight back. PDS Debt has helped hundreds of thousands of people cut debt and put money back in their pockets. If you're struggling with credit cards, personal loans, and medical bills, PDS offers custom options to help you get out of debt fast. They'll go beyond the numbers to understand your unique situation and craft a personalized plan. There's no minimum credit score, and they have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. Don't wait another month. Take back control in 30 seconds. Get your free personalized assessment and the best option for you at pds.com/peers. That's pdsdebt.com/peers. pdsdebt.com/peers. Today's show is sponsored by Oxford Natural, makers of the Optimum Day and Optimum Night all-natural supplements. Thousands of Brits and Americans are already taking them with incredible results. Optimum Day boosts your energy and supports weight loss throughout the day. Optimum Night helps you relax and get deep, refreshing sleep. They have countless success stories, including from some very familiar faces. England legend Michael Owen, who lost 40 pounds, AFTV's Robbie, who lost more than 100 pounds. To watch their full stories and many more, scan the QR code on your screen or visit oxfordnatural.com/peers. And here's the best part. Use the code PEERS and get 70% off your first order. Yes, 70% off with the code PEERS. And on the wider point about who the United States should let in, Rob, what is your view of that? I mean, obviously America was founded in a very multicultural way, right? It was the place that everyone could come to.
Yeah, but I mean, America wasn't founded by grabbing a bunch of dudes from other countries, bringing them here, giving them free apartments and welfare. It was by people who wanted to escape religious persecution, and they started building things, not just coming here getting handouts. I mean, I've been a lot of places and I've seen a lot of people, and I mean, some of the most welcoming people I've met were in a war zone in Ramadi. Like, I've seen it, and you can't just say these people bad, these people good. The conversations need to be had, but again, you need to be realistic. And as soon as the truth is told and you don't like it, you just say racist. You're not going to build anything up.
Let's talk about the truth here, Piers. I got to jump in here. When we talk about the founding of America, it was founded by European colonizers, built on the backs of enslaved Africans and on the genocide of indigenous people. To claim that it wasn't, just free handout, it literally was. The Homestead Act, which was finally repealed in 1987, gave hundreds of millions of acres of free land to white European immigrants while denying them to the descendants of enslaved Africans. And so even to this day, the single demographic, the largest demographic on public welfare are white Americans. And studies have been done on this.
What about the
repeatedly.
6,000 slaves that
This.
died building the World Cup venues for the Middle East in 2020?
And we condemn that too. And that's the
modern
difference between
slavery
you.
right now. Don't throw that slavery to the United States. We didn't invent it. We were the first to end it.
And that is the
No idea
difference between me and you. I have no problem condemning that slavery by Qatar during the World Cup. I have zero.
Why don't you lead with
problem.
that? That was the most recent.
Why are we not holding them accountable? The difference is that I want
that's
there
not
to
the
be
topic.
accountability and restitution there, but there is no accountability and restitution or reparations for the enslaved Africans and their descendants who suffered genocide. And we rewrite this history. Well, we built it by our bootstraps. No, you didn't. You built it on the backs of enslaved Africans. And to the comment that Islam is new to America, 1/3 of those Africans were Muslim, who were forced into Christianity, who were beaten and murdered and raped. This is the legacy of this country, and for us to move forward,
It's the legacy of the world, bro. The legacy of the world. Slavery's been everywhere, and it still exists in the Middle East.
Yeah,
hasn't been here in a while. Hundreds of thousands of Americans died again.
The only ones that abolished slavery was America.
I'm not
America was the
defending
only
that
one
slavery.
that abolished
You're
slavery.
defending the
That's
legacy of slavery
reality.
here in the United States. That's the fundamental difference between us.
I'm defending the United States because everybody in the world's trying to get here because whatever we did works. It's the greatest country in the world. That's what I'm doing, dude.
With a known war criminal, and you're trying to lecture me. I'm agreeing. We shouldn't be supporting those people. My question to you is, why do you continue to support a president who is rubbing elbows with MBS, who, Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth have killed more people than Jeffrey Dahmer with these illegal strikes, which are clearly a violation of international law.
All right, let me ask. All right, hang on, please. Let me ask Robert. Hang on, please. I want to ask, 'cause since you raised it, I want to ask Rob, given your outstanding service to your country, what do you make of these strikes on these Venezuelan boats? I mean, the argument, as you know, of people who are highly concerned about this is that there's been no evidence provided to the American people that they were all members of these gangs, one. And that secondly, in the most recent one, there appears to have been a double attack with people being attacked while they were in the water, and that is a breach of Geneva Convention. What is your view of both those issues?
Well, my view is, first of all, I wasn't there, so I can't say from firsthand knowledge. I'm going off of my experience. And if these are designated terrorist organizations, hitting them with a drone strike is within legal authorization. And they have teams of lawyers telling them that too. And in all my experience with drone strikes, it's never hit them once. And if they live, it's like, oh, whoopsie poopsie, you got to live. You hit them again, I think. I'm assuming I wasn't there, but I believe it's called delegated authority kill missions. That's what I'm thinking. If they're terrorists and they're going to kill 100,000 people a year with the fentanyl they're bringing in, I don't have a problem with that. But again, I'm not in the chain of command. If they're doing it legally, I don't think it's a problem. We do it everywhere in the world. We killed an American, Anwar al-Awlaki, in 2011 in Yemen in a drone strike. He wasn't convicted by a jury. Then we killed his son 2 weeks later. President Obama was in charge. So not a lot of hullabaloo about that. But because now we're in our own... Well, we're in our hemisphere here, and because you got to figure, you got to follow the money. Where are these drugs coming from South America, eking their way up through, the United States, up near the Chicago area, some of the Great Lakes for distribution? Someone's involved somewhere. Just follow the money. And the previous point too about bringing up Jeffrey Dahmer, dude, I've killed more people than Jeffrey Dahmer, and I don't think I'm a bad guy.
That's not the
The
high bar.
truth is, we need The truth is, we need more.
There's a big difference.
Let me bring in. I want to bring in Omar, if I may. I want to bring in Omar. Omar, let's talk about a wider issue here. Like in the UK, we have as many Muslims, if not more now, than in the whole of the United States. So pretty disproportionate. I mean, by comparison, for example, in the United States, there are 4 to 5 million Muslims and 4 to 5 million Jews. In the UK, there are about 5 million Muslims and 250,000 Jews. So it's a different dynamic to what is going on in the country. And the concern in my country, which has always been very tolerant, I think very multicultural, very well assimilated in the main, the concern comes from people who look at reports, verified reports, that there are now nearly 100 unofficial Sharia law courts, for example, operating in the UK. In other words, there are a group of people, in this case a Muslim community, operating their own law within our framework of our laws. Is that something that should be tolerated? I mean, should countries like the United States and the UK tolerate the existence of rival courts, rival law within their own border?
Piers, I promise I will answer your question very directly, but just a quick comment on those strikes and the mention of Obama. there's no question that Obama did, in fact, engage in unlawful strikes, and people should object to them when he kills an American citizen abroad with those drone strikes. And what Trump has done is just escalated that to a worse level. With Obama, again, not defending his policy, it's indefensible and should be condemned, nonetheless struggling with the idea, is this person a threat? Are people going to die if we don't engage in that strike? Those are the kind of calculations he's engaging in. And frankly, he should have erred on not engaging in extrajudicial killings. But in the case of Trump, there's not even the pretense of that. He declared these organizations terrorists so he can justify this war. We're bombing boats that we don't know anything about. We don't have any confirmation that they're in fact engaged in drug smuggling. And even if we did, we have no sense of why anybody who's on board would be in fact a threat and could not be apprehended and put on trial. So we engage in these strikes and then we kill them when people are hanging on these boats who are injured and obviously pose no threat. I think this is just utterly grotesque abuse of power and use of violence for the sake of using violence, completely unjustifiable and for alternate political ends. So just want to put that out. Now, on the question of Sharia courts, certainly they should not supersede the actual laws of the country. If a Muslim community wants to settle its own disputes using religious law consensually, they should be allowed to do that if they want to. There are certain things with Jewish law as well and many others. But ultimately, the law of the country is what should reign supreme. And if there are people who want to have the result heard, nobody should be able to impose that court in lieu of the actual law taking place and impose that on somebody else. So it's a matter of what the jurisdiction is of these courts. They should never supersede existing law, and I don't think that they do. I think these are completely consensual courts that people enter to resolve their religious disputes if they all parties agree that this is how they want to resolve their issues.
Valentina Gomez.
Sharia courts have no place in England. Sharia courts have no place in Christian nations. That's why you guys have 56 Muslim nations. And I fully support and love what President Trump and Pete Hegseth are doing. We need to bomb more narco-terrorism to oblivion. That's the reality. You defend terrorists because you're probably a little terrorist yourself as well. That's the reality.
Why would you say that?
What would I say? What?
Why do you use language like that? Why do you brand a fellow panelist who's actually a respected journalist a terrorist?
Someone who is defending terrorists. Someone who is
defending
terrorism. Bringing drugs into the United States.
He hasn't defended terrorism. Only one. Just to be clear, Valentina Gomez. I've had 3 reasonable members of this panel offering reasonable arguments.
Reasonable.
All I've heard from you so far is dumb bigotry, accusations of terrorism against people who are just perfectly ordinary journalists. There's something wrong with you. Why do you do this?
Sounds like you during COVID, Piers. You were vilifying, shaming, and trying to destroy people for not wanting to take the COVID vaccine.
Yeah.
You tried to destroy.
And you know what? I was wrong. I was wrong.
Exactly, you're wrong, and you still are wrong today.
Well, you don't become less wrong. I've admitted I was wrong. I've apologized. What I've not seen from you, is any admission of being wrong or an apology for the disgusting way you talk about people. Why do you do it?
I apologize for nothing. My statements and my actions have endured the test of time. And Piers, since you cut me off, let me finish. You've been on national television for 20 years, and during that entire time, England has only gotten more Muslim. For 20
when
years,
were you last in England?
To even say faggot or to even call out the rapist Muslims. Piers, you're not uncensored. The truth is, you have been complicit with the rape of England into its submission. It's not only on Keir Starmer, it's also on you, on the police and the courts that have covered up for their crimes. Absolutely. And I'll say what everybody else is thinking. England is better off without all the Muslims. And that goes the same way to the United States. We can solve all of our problems if these Muslims are sent back to their Sharia nations, because they're not here to assimilate.
You think there would be no problems? You think you'd have no, just to be clear, I'll tell you what, you finish. You finish. You said what you want to say. You said what you want to say. Yeah, you see, this has been my suspicion. Because the last time you were here, you were at a Tommy Robinson march. And this has been my problem with Tommy Robinson.
Oh, yes.
Not that Tommy Robinson wasn't right to expose the grooming gangs. He was. The problem is that he and many of his followers, like you, actually hate Muslims. Your actual genuine Islamophobes. You would like them all removed
Muslims,
from the
they belong in
country.
their Muslim nations. That's the thing. They're just obsessed with coming to Christian nations, burning our flag, chanting death to America, killing our American soldiers. So yes, they belong in their Muslim nations. Piers, let me finish what I said. These Muslims are not here to assimilate to the American or the British way of life.
Actually, many Muslims assimilate perfectly well.
They only contribute to rape statistics and terrorist attacks.
Really? And you don't think any white Christians commit any crime in the UK or US?
They do, and we deal with them.
Well, we do the same with Muslims who commit crimes.
No, you don't.
Yes,
No, you
we
don't,
do.
Piers. That's why you have a huge Pakistani, a Muslim, a
That
dirty
was a
Muslim
disgusting scandal. Yeah, you know what? You know what? On that point, you're absolutely right. The British Pakistani grooming scandal, abuse scandal.
They're not British.
Well, you can use any terminology you like. I will use mine, which is the correct terminology. That scandal was disgusting. It was actually exposed by a journalist who I knew on the Times, who did some extraordinary work. Tommy Robinson amplified it, but it was exposed by a journalist on the Times newspaper.
Because of Tommy Robinson,
and it was covered up in a disgraceful manner that shamed my country, right? And I'm very happy to agree about that point. But it doesn't mean that every Muslim of the 5 million Muslims in my country are somehow complicit with those disgusting monsters. In the same way that when a white Christian commits a heinous crime, I don't assume that every white Christian is the same. Why would you?
Piers, you can take the Muslim out of a terrorist nation, but you cannot take the terrorism out of a Muslim. And give me one example of a Christian committing a terrorist attack right now.
Well,
against Muslims.
Let me ask you then, when the UK and the United States illegally invaded Iraq in 2003, I waged a campaign against that. So what would you say about that illegal invasion of a Muslim country?
Muslims are killing Christians in Nigeria, Piers.
Right. So I didn't ask you about Nigeria. I asked you about Iraq.
Iraq? Well, repeat your question again, please.
Do you agree that we illegally invaded Iraq in 2003?
I don't think she's right enough to understand your question, Piers.
I don't think she does. I don't think she wants to understand it. But in 2003, in my opinion, illegally invaded Iraq, a sovereign country. 1 million people died. It created ISIS, which then wreaked mayhem for 2 decades, and was a stain on my country and on the Prime Minister Tony Blair, who I think should have been held up in a court of law over what happened under my name and the name of the British people. But do you care about that? Do you care that 1 million people, including hundreds of thousands of Muslims, were killed in a war in Iraq, which in my opinion was fought on an illegal, false pretext that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, which he didn't, it turned out?
Piers, in 2003, I was 4 years old, and I cannot change what happened back then.
No, I asked you for your opinion.
I
asked you for your opinion.
They can bomb every terrorist country they want.
Your
That's the
intellect has
reality.
not grown a year since then.
Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, ISIS,
you still think
they
like
all
a
come from the
4-year-old.
Middle East. But then they're obsessed. Yes, I'm honest. And I am the American dream on steroids. I have worked my way to the top.
You're not the American dream, Valentina. You're not the American dream. You're the American nightmare.
Yes, I am.
You're somebody fomenting hatred towards an entire community in your country. And I don't understand why you need to do that.
They belong in their Muslim nations, Piers. That's
Sorry?
the reality.
What's that?
They belong in their Muslim nations,
Really?
Piers. That's the reality.
So would you deport every single?
For the UK,
so just to be clear, then you would deport. Just to be clear, you would deport every Muslim from the US and the UK, would you?
Yes.
Where I'm from, chips are called crisps, and our chips are actually what Americans call French fries, but that's not really my biggest problem. Have you ever actually read the label on a bag of chips? It sounds like a science experiment. Seed oils, MSG, artificial dyes, mystery ingredients which sound like diseases. It cannot be good for you. Masa Chips are the answer. They have just 3 quality ingredients: organic corn, sea salt, and 100% grass-fed beef tallow. It's a snack that feels good without the crash and the sluggishness. And if you love Masa, you'll love Vandy Crisps too. 3 ingredients, delicious flavors. Smokehouse barbecue is a personal favorite of mine. Use code PIERS, P-I-E-R-S, for 25% off your first order at masachips.com or vandycrisps.com. You can also click the link below or scan the QR code to claim this delicious offer. Masa and Vandy also now available nationwide at Sprout supermarkets. Stop by and pick up a few bags before I buy them all. That's what you are. You're just a bigot.
This is the kind of genocidal rhetoric.
They belong in
that
the
we
Muslim
understand.
nations.
You know,
As
we have
any
asylum
person in the United States,
First
I
of all,
am the only one that has the guts to say it.
Oh, there's nothing
I'll tell you
courageous
this,
about
yes,
being a bigot.
There's nothing crazy about being a
I'll be
bigot.
very clear.
Yeah.
The United Kingdom needs to grow a pair of balls and have
Really?
some guns.
Actually, I'm very glad the United Kingdom doesn't have
let me say
anybody
something
like
here,
you.
Piers.
I was in the
Omar,
United
yeah.
Kingdom not too long ago.
I think that
And
Valentina
I was
has
in
given
the United
away
Kingdom not
how
too long
little
ago,
she
and it
knows
looks
or
like
understands
Baghdad.
about
Yeah,
the world.
Valentina, let Omar speak, please. Omar.
All right, Omar, go ahead.
I mean, again, she has given away how dumb she is with this challenge of name somebody else who's committed an act of terrorism. I mean, everybody in the United States is familiar with cases of Christian extremists blowing up abortion clinics. We know that there is a problem with child soldiers in parts of Africa, of Christian child soldiers. We know there's a problem with a Jewish fanatic in Montana at one point who shot a bartender over a non-kosher drink. We know that there is cases of Jewish fanatics in Israel stabbing people at a gay pride parade. And we see the fanatics who are right now engaging in this onslaught in Gaza, religiously motivated. But all of us have the basic decency and common sense not to paint with a broad brush and say that this is representative of the entire Jewish community or the entire Christian community. And the same logic applies perfectly in this case. But she's literally so clueless. She's under this fanatical impression that only Muslims commit acts of violence. And frankly, I appreciate you standing up for me, Piers, in this case, but to have somebody this dumb and hateful and to not be insulted by them on a program would take away from my sense of dignity and self-respect. It is reaffirming that I'm a decent human being that I have somebody like that actually directing all this cheap, pathetic name calling at me.
I always go back to the data, and what the data repeatedly tells us is that our policies now are based on lessons learned from history. You know, after World War II, after Jewish people suffered the atrocities of the Holocaust, millions murdered by Hitler in the Holocaust, the United States realized, hey, we should have allowed Jewish people to enter and seek refuge here before this atrocity occurred. And hence the asylum system was established so that people could come here fleeing their lives for safety, to go through a thorough vetting process, and then be admitted to this country. The Cato Institute did a phenomenal study on this and found that you can count literally on one hand how many asylum seekers have actually caused harm or violent harm to the United States. Literally on one hand. That's not an exaggeration. This is a conservative think tank, mind you. They calculate that the chances of an American being killed by an asylum seeker is 1 in 4 billion. That, by the way, is about 4,000 times less likely than to suffer a mass shooting or a shooting in this country. And that's the real issue, right? We have 380 mass shootings, predominantly, almost all by Christian and predominantly by men. But we don't demonize all Christians for this. We don't demonize all men for this. We recognize that there's a specific issue that we need to have a thoughtful, fact-based solution to. And we build better gun safety legislation around that. Immigration has to work the same way. We recognize that our immigration system is not functional, it's unjust, it's broken. And we solve that not by just demonizing swaths of people or by banning or ending immigration, because that's going to ultimately hurt the United States. We do that by having a more thorough, more robust vetting system, a more thorough, robust immigration system, more immigration judges, more attorneys to process these claims. I've done this work for 15 years. I've worked with Afghan refugees and asylees for decades. And what I'm here to tell you is that they want the exact same thing that every person in the United States want: peace and safety. Nobody wanted the U.S. to invade them. Nobody wanted the Taliban to take over. Nobody asked Donald Trump to release 5,000 Taliban terrorists into the field as part of his negotiation tactics, which was atrocious. These are ordinary human beings. And the fact, and again, the data, I come back to that, tells us that you can literally count on one hand how much harm has been caused. In reality, we need to find ways to work together and build a stronger union that way.
Okay, let me ask Rob O'Neill.
The Muslim wants to bring
sorry,
more Muslims into the
Valentina,
United
your name
States.
isn't Rob
Why
O'Neill.
do you send these
I'm
Muslims
asking Rob
to
O'Neill a
statistics Muslim
question.
nation?
You're not Rob O'Neill, and you never will be Rob O'Neill, by the way,
No, I'm Valentina Gomez,
in any
Piers, but that's
capacity.
okay. I'll wait.
Rob O'Neill, the White House put out a video using a Sabrina Carpenter hit as the backdrop to videos of immigration raids. Now, she responded on X by saying, "This video is evil and disgusting. Do not ever involve me or my music to benefit your inhumane agenda." So there's an argument there between her and the White House over use of her music. But in that point, which I mentioned earlier, Rob, where I do think there's almost universal agreement that the clampdown on the southern border has been incredibly successful and is the right thing to do for America. That it's good for national security. It's good to reinforce the fact America has a strong border. And most Americans I've talked to say if someone's undocumented in the United States and they commit a crime that's not about their visa status, then they should be deported. The disagreement is coming where the majority of Americans who are being polled feel very uneasy about the spectacle of ICE raids on people who may have been in the country 10 years, brought up kids there, had kids in America, have a job, pay taxes, contribute to society. What do you feel about that? I mean, do you feel that that is unfair? Do you think it's right? What do you feel?
Well, I know there's a lot to the deportation process, and I hope that we're smart enough as a country that if there are people here that aren't that came here illegally but they're working, there's probably a better way than just deporting them. Find a way to make them citizenship. People that are working and contributing, I think they should be here. Criminals, yeah, you got to deport them. I mean, again, I'm trying to make it sound simple. It's obviously not simple, but a video like that, I mean, that sort of that kind of looked like you're tracking down workers and tackling them. There was a woman in there, and if they didn't get Sabrina Carpenter's permission, I don't disagree with her. If she disagrees with that and it looks like they're tackling innocent people, don't use my music. That's cool too. But I mean, I would much rather, first of all, it's a lot more complex than a TikTok video or a reel on Instagram. But just like running at someone who's going into a grocery store and tackling them and cuffing them, I don't think that's the right look. I mean, I think it's not quite as simple as get rid of all of them. But there are people that are working, contributing, that need to be here. Very, very complex. I'm happy it's not my choice to make, but yeah, with an artist like that, it happens in campaigns all the time too. If they don't want to use it, don't use it. Respect them as well.
I mean, Omar, just finally on that.
Yeah,
I mean, there's no doubt under the Biden administration, they seem to completely lose control of the southern border in particular. I mean, depending what figure you believe, as many as 10 million, maybe more people came in illegally, and that's completely. You cannot have that. I mean, as Ronald Reagan said, if you don't have a border, you haven't got a country. And I think we would all agree with that basic premise. But I thought that Rob gave a nuanced response there, which is probably in line with a lot of Americans, right? I just think most Americans, they probably feel there's a line to be drawn here. If you have been in the country for a long period of time and you are law-abiding and contributing and paying taxes and all the rest of it, and you've had kids there, it's that I think is exercising a lot of the antipathy towards what are otherwise very successful immigration policies.
Yeah,
Piers,
there's
the reality
absolutely
is
a
that if you
legitimate
came
Sorry,
here
Valentina,
illegally,
for Omar.
you're a
about
criminal.
immigration.
Yeah, Omar.
There's obviously a legitimate debate to have around immigration, but what we are seeing with this administration is this sadism, really taking pleasure in making other people's lives difficult, doing an ASMR video on the sound of chains of immigrants who are being chained up to be shipped overseas to different countries. I mean, that's really the problem. And you have a lot of these immigrants who are here. They've come here, yes, illegally, technically, but many of them come as children, as 5-year-olds, and they live their entire lives in this country. They don't have any other home. When you ship them somewhere else, they're going to a completely alien environment. These are obviously people who should be staying here. And the sheer cruelty with which we are dealing with this, with the ways these raids are taking place, kidnapping people off the streets, often leaving children stranded or using children to lure parents out of a house in order to get a hold of them. In many cases, arresting American citizens on suspicion that they might be undocumented immigrants. And you have people dying in ICE custody. This is the scandal. This isn't about the policy debate about what our border should be open or not. Americans can have that debate, but the level of sadism and xenophobia and this taking pleasure in the suffering of immigrants has been utterly, utterly despicable and uncalled for. And you see it in the comments that you've had earlier on with the representative from the Trump administration that you had on the show, saying, what is your message to immigrants or to the Muslim community or whatever? And they have no answer to any of it. All they have is doubling down on cruelty in the name of national security, and that's no way to run a country.
I'll just add to Omar's.
I definitely have an answer.
We were promised by the Trump regime that he would go after violent criminals. The own data from the DOJ shows that here in Chicago, where I live, more than 97% of the people that they have trafficked and rounded up and kidnapped have no criminal record whatsoever. 70% of the people in North Carolina, no criminal record whatsoever. ProPublica found that they have rounded up and arrested 170 U.S. citizens. These are people who are actual citizens, but because they're of Latino ethnicity, they're being targeted. Another study by the ACLU found that pregnant women are being rounded up and suffering miscarriages because they're being tortured in these ICE gulags. None of this is due process. None of this is what Americans asked for. If we want true safety, we can do so, but it's going to require upholding the Constitution, not just shooting from the hip as this administration is doing.
Okay, well, Valentina, you're going to find out what the Texan people think of you in the 31st district at the ballot box, which is how it should be. in a democratic society. And look, here's my pledge to you. Here's my pledge to you. If it turns out the people of Texas, a state that I love and have spent a lot of time in, if it turns out they're all as bigoted as you are, then you'll win. And if you win, I'll get you back on Uncensored. But here's the deal. If you lose, you're never coming back. Fair deal?
Yes, let's make one thing very clear. Your team are the ones that begged me to be on the show, not the other way around. I have hundreds of millions of views. I am actually the only.
We literally sent you one email and you said yes. We sent you. Just to be clear. Just to be clear. I don't know. Just to be clear. Stop talking. Just to be clear, we sent you one email and you immediately said yes. That's not a beg. That's not a beg.
That is a beg.
That's a request for you to come on this program because I couldn't believe that you were going to be. I could not, honestly.
I wanted to come speak
I couldn't believe.
I wanted to hear the British accent.
Let me
I wanted
speak.
to say hello
Let me
to the
speak.
British lads.
Let me speak. I couldn't believe that you were as vile and bigoted as it seemed, but it turns out you were. So here's my pledge to you. Like I said, if you win. And the people of Texas, like your vile, bigoted rhetoric,
you're just a puppet for
come
the
back on.
establishment.
Otherwise, we're never going to see you again.
Fine.
So good luck in your election. Trust me. Trust me when I say this. The people of Texas. Trust me when I say this. The people in the 31st district of Texas are not going to vote for you because you're a vile bigot, and that is a fact. and you can take it to the bank.
About President Trump, Piers.
And you want to look at yourself and think about the way you talk about people. Anyway, I'll leave it there. Thank you all very much for an interesting debate. Piers Morgan Uncensored is proudly independent. The only boss around here is me. If you enjoy our show, we ask for only one simple thing. Hit subscribe on YouTube and follow Piers Morgan Uncensored on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And in return, we will continue our mission to inform, irritate and entertain. And we'll do it all for free. Independent, uncensored media has never been more critical, and we couldn't do it without you.